The scream tore through the quiet house just as Willow's hands tightened around Drew's throat, her face close enough for him to smell the faint sweetness of the lotion she always wore. Drew could not fight back. His body was weak, his breath already shallow from the medication she had given him minutes earlier. The door behind her was still half open, and in that narrow space Scout stood frozen, her small hand gripping the spare key she had carried since childhood. Her eyes were wide with shock and terror as she watched her stepmother lean over her father, calm and determined, as if this moment had been rehearsed 100 times in Willow's mind. Willow heard the scream and turned, her expression changing in a heartbeat from focused resolve to cold calculation. There was no going back now. Everything she had planned, every crime she had committed, led to this instant, and anyone who stood in her way was no longer just an obstacle but a threat that had to be silenced. Willow had not always been like this. Once she had been seen as gentle, fragile, someone who endured pain rather than caused it. That image had served her well for years, allowing her to move through Port Charles unnoticed, underestimated, trusted by people who believed her softness was real. But beneath that surface, something darker had been growing. Old crimes had taught her how easily blame could be shifted, how truth could be bent if the right emotions were displayed at the right time. New crimes had shown her how powerful she could be when she stopped pretending to be afraid. Drew was not her first target, and he would not be the last if things went according to her plan. The night Drew was shot was the turning point. Willow had held the gun with steady hands, her heart racing but her mind clear. She knew exactly where to stand, how to make the angle look wrong, how to leave just enough confusion that investigators would argue over the details. When Drew fell, she was already thinking ahead, not to his survival but to how his injury could be used. She had the key piece she needed, the literal key that unlocked access to evidence in spaces that only Michael was supposed to control. That key meant power. It meant she could move freely, plant what needed to be planted, and later claimed that Michael had been the only one with the opportunity to pull the trigger. Framing Michael was never about revenge alone. It was about the children. Willow believed that if Michael was removed from their lives, legally and permanently, she would finally win the one battle she had never been able to control, custody. She had convinced herself that she deserved them, that she was the better parent, the safer presence. In her mind, putting Michael in prison was not cruelty, but necessity. Drew's shooting was simply the tool she needed to make that future possible. If Michael was blamed not only for the shooting, but eventually for Drew's death, the case would be airtight. A grieving widow, a fallen hero, a villain exposed. It was a story the town would accept without question. What made Willow truly dangerous now was that she was no longer acting alone or impulsively. Every move was layered, every lie supported by another lie beneath it. She watched Michael closely, studied his habits, noted when he was distracted or emotionally vulnerable. She baited him with small arguments, subtle provocations, hoping to create moments of anger that could later be exaggerated and retold. She needed people to remember him as volatile, capable of violence, even if that memory was manufactured. And so far, no one had seen through her. Alexis had come close. There had been a moment, brief but sharp, when Alexis looked at Willow with suspicion instead of sympathy. Willow noticed it immediately. From that day on, Alexis joined the growing list of people who could not be allowed to interfere. Willow did not target everyone with the same intensity. Some were distractions. Others were safeguards. Alexis was a risk. Someone intelligent, experienced, and unafraid to ask uncomfortable questions. Willow adjusted her behavior around her, presenting vulnerability, even seeking advice, all while quietly making sure Alexis never got close enough to the truth to touch it. Drew's condition gave Willow the perfect excuse to tighten her control. She insisted that he be transferred home, arguing that familiar surroundings would help his recovery. She spoke of love and devotion, of wanting to care for her husband with her own hands. Doctors hesitated at first, but her persistence wore them down. No one questioned her motives because no one wanted to believe that a wife could wish harm on a man who could barely lift his head. But Willow's real intention was never to heal Drew. It was to isolate him. At home, there would be no nurses watching closely, no hospital protocols, no unexpected interruptions. There would only be Willow, her medications, and her timeline. As days passed, Drew grew weaker instead of stronger. Willow adjusted his doses carefully, just enough to keep him alive but compliant. She talked to him constantly, her voice soothing, telling him stories about the children, about the future they would have once he was better. Drew sensed something was wrong, but his thoughts were slow, his instincts dulled. He tried to ask questions, to express his fear, but Willow always had an answer ready. She blamed the side effects. She blamed stress. She blamed him for worrying too much. Scout was the variable Willow could not fully control. The girl was perceptive, deeply attached to her father, and more observant than people gave her credit for. Scout noticed the changes in the house, the locked doors, the way Willow seemed to watch everything and everyone. She noticed how her father's eyes followed Willow when she thought he was asleep, full of unease. Scout carried the spare key because Drew had wanted her to always feel welcome, always able to come home. Willow had forgotten about that key, dismissed Scout as a child who could be managed with smiles and gentle words. The day Scout walked in unexpectedly was not supposed to happen. Willow had planned the moment with precision, choosing a time when she believed no one would interrupt. Drew was in bed, barely conscious, his body already compromised. Willow stood over him with a syringe in her hand, convinced that this was the final step. Once Drew was gone, the blame would shift smoothly. Michael would crumble under the weight of suspicion. Custody hearings would tilt in her favor. She would emerge as the tragic survivor, strong and wronged. Scout's scream shattered that illusion. In that instant, Willow understood that her secret was no longer safe. The child had seen too much. The choice in front of her was brutal and immediate. Protect the plant or protect the girl. Willow did not hesitate. She moved fast, crossing the room before Scout could run, clamping a hand over her mouth. Scout fought back with surprising strength, scratching and kicking, but Willow was fueled by desperation. She whispered threats mixed with false comfort, promising not to hurt her if she stayed quiet. Dragging Scout to the hidden room was something Willow had considered only as a remote possibility. Now it became reality. The room had once been a storage space, forgotten and sealed off. Willow locked Scout inside, her heart pounding, her mind racing through the consequences. Killing the child crossed a line. Even Willow hesitated to step over, but the thought lingered, dark and tempting. If Scout talked, everything would fall apart. If Scout disappeared, the story would change again. Meanwhile, outside the house, the web Willow had spun was tightening. People were starting to notice inconsistencies. The timeline of Drew's shooting did not fully align. The key Michael supposedly had access to appeared in places he could not explain. Someone was manipulating events, and though no one could yet name Willow as the culprit, the sense that something was wrong grew stronger by the day. Michael himself felt it, a constant pressure, as if the walls were slowly closing in. Back in the house, Willow returned to Drew, trying to regain her composure. He was still alive, his breathing shallow, his eyes barely open. For a moment, doubt flickered. Ending his life now would complicate things. Waiting could be dangerous. Scout was locked away, terrified and alone, and time was not on Willow's side. Every decision from this point forward would either secure her victory or destroy her completely. She sat beside Drew, holding his hand, her expression soft once more. To anyone who might walk in, she would look like a devoted wife caring for her injured husband. But inside, her thoughts were cold and sharp. She weighed options, calculated risks, and prepared herself to do whatever was necessary. Willow had already crossed too many lines to turn back. The crimes of her past and present had fused into one relentless drive toward her goal. And as the house settled into an uneasy silence, the danger did not fade. It deepened, waiting for the next move, the next mistake, and the moment when the truth would finally claw its way to the surface. The house felt smaller with every passing minute, as if the walls themselves were closing in on Willow. She moved quietly through the hallway, every step measured, every sound controlled. Behind the locked door, Scout sat on the cold floor, hugging her knees, trying to steady her breathing. She did not understand everything she had seen, but she understood enough to know that her father was in danger and that the woman she had once tried to trust was capable of terrible things. Fear pressed against her chest, yet beneath it was a growing determination that surprised even her. In the bedroom, Drew drifted in and out of consciousness. The medication clouded his thoughts, but fragments of memory cut through the haze. The look on Willow's face when she thought no one was watching. The sound of Scout's scream. The sudden weight of Willow's hands. Drew tried to move, to speak, but his body refused to cooperate. Panic surged, then faded into exhaustion. He knew something was very wrong, and the knowledge that his daughter was somewhere in the house filled him with a desperate need to survive. Willow returned to his side, her expression carefully composed. She checked his pulse, adjusted the blanket, and spoke softly as if nothing had happened. She told herself that this was still salvageable. Scout was locked away, frightened but alive. Drew was weak and dependent. Michael was already under suspicion. The plan had not failed. It had only become more complicated. Complication, Willow believed, could still be managed. Outside the house, Michael sat alone in his car, staring at the darkened windows. He had come to check on Drew after receiving a message from Willow that felt strangely urgent yet vague. Something about her tone unsettled him. It was not panic, not concern, but a kind of forced calm that made his instincts flare. Michael considered leaving, telling himself he was being paranoid. Instead, he stepped out of the car and walked toward the door. Inside, Willow froze when she heard the faint sound of footsteps on the porch. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She had not planned for visitors. She moved quickly, closing Drew's bedroom door and turning off the light. She whispered to him to rest, to stay quiet, her voice edged with something sharper than concern. Then she went to the front door, past the locked room where Scout listened intently, hope and fear tangled together as she recognized Michael's voice through the walls. Willow opened the door with a practiced smile. Michael immediately sensed the tension. The air felt thick, heavy with unspoken words. He asked about Drew, about Scout, about why Willow had sounded so strange on the phone. Willow answered smoothly, but her eyes flicked toward the hallway more than once. Michael noticed. He stepped inside despite her subtle attempt to block his path. As Michael moved deeper into the house, his gaze caught on small details that did not add up. A door that was usually open now firmly shut. A chair knocked slightly out of place. The faint smell of antiseptic stronger than it should have been. His unease grew into something sharper. He asked where Scout was. Willow hesitated just a fraction too long before replying that Scout was not there, that she must have gone out with friends. Michael did not believe her. From behind the locked door, Scout heard her name and felt a surge of hope. She banged softly at first, then louder, calling out for Michael. The sound echoed through the hallway, impossible to ignore. Willow's face drained of color. Michael turned toward the noise, his expression hardening with every step. Willow moved fast, stepping in front of him, trying to laugh it off, claiming it was the house settling, the old pipes making noise. Michael pushed past her. He reached the door, tested the handle, found it locked. When he demanded an explanation, Willow's mask finally cracked. She lunged for him, desperation overtaking calculation. The struggle was brief but violent. Michael was stronger, fueled by fear for Scout and confusion about Willow's sudden aggression. He shoved her away and broke the lock. The door swung open to reveal Scout, trembling but unharmed. She ran to Michael, clinging to him, sobbing as she tried to explain what she had seen. Her words came out in broken fragments, but the meaning was clear enough. Willow had hurt Drew. Willow had tried to kill him. Michael felt the world tilt. The accusations Willow had been building against him suddenly made terrifying sense. He turned to face her, rage and betrayal burning in his chest. Willow backed away, her mind racing. This was not how it was supposed to end. She had planned every angle, every lie, but she had underestimated two things: a child's courage and Michael's persistence. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Someone, perhaps a neighbor, perhaps Alexis, who had grown suspicious and kept watch, had called for help. Willow realized that escape was slipping out of reach. She looked toward the bedroom where Drew lay, toward the children she had claimed to want to protect, and finally toward the door. Police officers flooded the house, weapons drawn, voices commanding calm. Willow did not resist when they took her into custody. Her expression was eerily calm, almost relieved. As they led her away, she met Michael's eyes and spoke quietly, telling him that this was not over, that people would still believe what they wanted to believe. Michael said nothing. He held Scout close, his focus on keeping her safe. Drew survived. The doctors later confirmed that the medication Willow had given him would have killed him if she had continued. Recovery was slow and painful, both physically and emotionally. The knowledge that the person he had trusted most had been willing to end his life left deep scars. Scout stayed by his side whenever she could, her presence a constant reminder of why he fought to heal. The investigation unraveled Willow's web piece by piece. Evidence she thought she had hidden was uncovered. The key she had used so confidently became proof of her manipulation rather than Michael's guilt. Witnesses came forward, including Alexis, who admitted her earlier suspicions. The story Willow had tried to sell collapsed under the weight of the truth. In court, Willow listened as her crimes were laid out in detail. Old offenses resurfaced, patterns emerged, and the image of the fragile woman shattered completely. She did not cry, she did not beg. When the verdict was read, she simply closed her eyes, as if finally accepting the reality she could no longer control. For Michael, the ordeal changed everything. He fought for custody, not out of vengeance, but out of a renewed understanding of how fragile safety could be. He became more protective, more present, determined never to underestimate danger again. Scout found her voice through therapy, learning that her bravery had saved her father's life. Drew, though still healing, found strength in his family and in the knowledge that the truth had come out before it was too late. The house that had been the stage for so much fear eventually felt lighter again. Windows were opened, locks were changed, life moved forward, scarred but intact. Willow's name became a cautionary tale, a reminder that monsters did not always look like monsters, and that trust could be weaponized by those who knew how to exploit it. In the end, the plan Willow believed was perfect collapsed because of one simple truth. No matter how carefully lies were built, they could not withstand the combined weight of courage, persistence, and the undeniable pull of the truth.